computer.
Yeah, we're recording.
We're recording. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Katie Martin, and this is our second week. It's going to be our second week of the Learner-Centered Innovation book study. And I am so excited to have Katie Novak here, who is an expert in all things, including momming, UDL, district leadership, and just an amazing human being. So I'm excited to dig into with her this just for the next couple 20-30 minutes, check in on how life's going and connect about how we can really support kids remotely and in our own homes. So Katie, would you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the other half of the Katies. I am Katie Novak, and I'm an assistant superintendent of schools, and I am also an educational consultant and a mom of 4 little ones. And right now I'm doing all 3 of those things from home, from my guest bedroom, which is really challenging. So all of you, I know that we're going through this together, and you probably have a lot of questions about, gosh, like, how do we do this? And the reality is we've never had to do this at such a large scale before. And I think that right now we're all taking theory and trying to put it into practice, but just know that anything you do to move forward is a step in the right direction. And we can't suddenly, change virtual learning, but we can certainly improve it day by day. And I'm so happy to share a little bit about how I have done that as an assistant superintendent, as a consultant, and as a mom.
Awesome. So of course, you guys are going to learn so much from Katie today, as am I. I was just mentioning that I listened to Brene Brown's new podcast, and she talks about FFTs, and I won't say what that means. You have to look that up, but it's a blank first time, really about being a first timer. And we are all in first time kind of downward spirals right now. Like, what are we doing? What are the right next steps? And so I just wanted to get a chance to talk to Katie, especially since she put out some good lessons for her own kids. I know that I spent a lot of time over the weekend thinking, how am I going to take what I've been talking about, what I did in the classroom, what I support districts and leaders to do? How do I now take that as a mom, and what is my day going to look like? And I thought a lot about that. But Katie put together some lessons for her own kids. And so I'd love you to share, how's that going? What are you doing? How are you organizing your days with your kids?
So it's actually been amazing. It's gone so much better than I even anticipated it. Like, it's finally like, 20 years of education is finally paying off for me here. So the same exact thing in Massachusetts, where I'm an administrator, where my kids go to school, we cannot mandate any kind of learning. So although we have to provide options for virtual learning for continued education, it cannot be mandatory. We can't be covering anything new. And so it's kind of like we're in this weird space where we're trying to provide learning experiences, and yet we can't move forward, right? And so there's a lot of, well, you could do this, or you could do that, and you could do this. And I'm like, gosh, like, I don't know how I can manage all 4 of my kids doing different things while I'm still having to be on webinars and give virtual professional development at work. And there's just so many things going on. And so I was talking to one of my colleagues on the day before we all got booted out. I'm the assistant superintendent, and one of my assistant principals, her name's Allison Sansanito, mom of 3 under 8 years old. And I was like, I feel like I need a structure. Like, I see these things going around online that are like ELA time, cleaning time, but I need more structure than that, because what does ELA time mean? And because I have a significant background in UDL, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to design something that will work for all of my kids. I want to equally challenge and support my 5-year-old and my 9-year-olds and my 10-year-old. And how do I do that? And so I did use some inspiration online for how people were kind of blocking up the day, making sure there's time to connect and time to go outside and time to clean. And then I really zoomed back, and I'm like, well, what's really the goal here? And recently I've been learning a lot about deeper learning. Like, I've been learning it for my own district the past couple of weeks. And deeper learning is really about interdisciplinary. How do we braid things together? So the day doesn't feel so compartmentalized. Like, now we do math, now we do ELA, now we do social studies. And so I was literally, we're sitting in the staff room, and I'm like, maybe I'll do a theme a day. Tomorrow, maybe I could do a theme on something like angles and shapes. And my brother's an architect, and we could call him, and then we could and we started playing with these ideas. And I'm like, oh, wait, let's write this down. And so we wrote down the day together, and it was a hot mess. It was just like in Google Docs, like there was nothing organized about it. It was nothing pretty about it at all. It was literally like, okay, so let's build in time. Oh, we got to have time for here, and we got to have time for free time. And I just shared it on Twitter to basically say like, hey, I'm going to post these every day. If you feel like you need help, then grab it. I'm like, here's a UDL homeschool lesson. And so essentially, like when we have these more academic times, we just call it universal design for learning, and it's like totally thematic. So we shared it, one day there were 14,000 access points on the website. And I was like, oh, this is like a thing now. This is a real thing. And so we decided, you know what, let's do them every day. I created a link on my website for them. You can certainly share it in the book chat. And every day has a theme. So today is oceans. And so like our walk in the morning is like going through and like, counting all the different ocean drains. We come in, we do a go noodle dance for oceans, and then they go to Newsela. They all choose their own article. Obviously my littlest, I still have to read it out loud, but he chooses the article. And then there's, art all about the ocean, and we're outside playing octopus tag. And within every single block, there are numerous options and choices for the kids to have. But at the end of the day, we all sit down together and we're like, okay, what have we learned about the ocean? And there's something that's just been really cool and powerful about that. And it is working. Like my house is for the most part calm. I mean, not calm all the time, don't get me wrong. But my husband's like, guys, do you realize like how lucky you are that we have this structure here? But they're getting used to it today. They're like, oh, it's a school day, as opposed to like Sunday. It was yesterday. But I think that there's nothing that I could do. There's not one thing that I could do that I could give my 5-year-old and my 10-year-old that they would enjoy the same thing. They're just at such different spots. And that's really what universal design is all about, is how do we design predicting variability? I know the range of variability, and I don't want to design something for Torrin and for Aylin and for Brecken and for Bowden, but I want to design one thing, and then I can say to them, like, here are your options and choices, which one works for you? And they are literally, I would say they're thriving. I mean, they fight sometimes, they're going to drive us nuts at times, but for the most part, it's way better than I thought it would be. But again, I mean, Allison and I will spend at least an hour every night co-planning something for the next day. And so doing it well absolutely requires time and adjustment. And so I would say that if you're stepping into that space, definitely borrow and use and steal what's already out there. No one needs to reinvent the wheel. It's just realizing that there's so many different resources that can get kids to the same place if we empower them to direct their own learning to get there.
I think that's such an important point. And people always say like, oh, it's personalized learning. So now I have to go and instead of doing one lesson, I have to create 30 lessons. Or what do I do if I have 200 kids? And I would say, you can't. I don't believe personalization is about one teacher creating different things for each and every kid. And what you just said, you can't do it for your 4 kids. I can't do it for my 2. I certainly don't expect teachers to do it for all of theirs. What you can do, like you said, is design it so everyone can access it and the learners can jump in and take ownership of their learning. If there's different entry points and there's different ways that people can access information, bring their strengths to the problem, solve things together, collaborate. And so much of what you said and how you designed is exactly how I thought about how I wanted to design for my own kids. I wanted time for there to be goal setting. I wanted time for them to solve problems that mattered. I wanted time for them to do things and like build on their skills from where they are, but not necessarily do 10 different worksheets. And when I sat down to design our schedule, I wasn't saying, okay, now science, now social studies, now math, and separating all these subjects like we do in school. And it just got me to thinking of, why are we doing this so unnaturally in school? Right. If we look at like, here's how you actually learn. Here is how we actually want to solve problems in the real world. Why are we taking school out of school and putting it into this context? Instead, how can we really focus on authentic learning? Yeah. And like you said, design it in a way that people can access it.
Yeah, so, it was awesome. Like the day that we were talking about animals, and we did a virtual field trip to the zoo, and Then we went to this, one of the choices was there's a site called Zoo Babies where all the zoos in the country report like if a new birth is done, and they have like a video, and like my kids went wild for it, and one of the options was like, you can, like write to the zoo, like, welcome the baby to the world, and can we actually send it? I'm like, yes, like this is the zoo's contact information. You can make a video, you can do a podcast, but just like, there's only 48 of these, the species left in the world, and now there's 2 more. This is pretty amazing. And it was like, for them to be like, this is real, was so interesting to me, that I'm like, what have we done with like word problems and ELA curriculum that they're like, wait, this is happening right now? I'm like, yes, it's happening right now. That is the aquarium right this second. And so again, the thing about authentic that I think is also huge is like, it needs to be based on something real, because, we can do a lot of kind of customized, personalized learning where it's like, you're choosing all these fantasy novels, and that's great, but like, let's ground this in the fact that you can understand the world around us better.
Yeah, absolutely. And we contrive a lot of situations and say, here, this is authentic, or, like you said, this is real. I've seen so many worksheets that, ask to figure out the main problem, and like, here, come home and read this like small little paragraph and answer the main idea. I don't know if anything kills the love of reading more than that. I see that and I automatically am like, no, thank you. But you give kids something that matters, like, oh, I can watch a live birth. I can be curious about something, and then I can ask questions and I can add my input, and then kids want to write. And people always say, I'm sure you hear this all the time, I can never get my kids to write. I can never get them to read. Well, are you giving them something that they are curious about reading about? Are you inviting them to wonder and look around their world and figure out what they could write about, or what they could read, what they could read to learn more about?
Yeah, it is. It's wild. And again, I think this is an opportunity for all of us to reset and to say, like, once we create these options and choices virtually, by saying like, today, take 2 hours to like, here's a driving question. A big driving question is like, what does water insecurity do to the human experience? Like, if you don't know where to get your water from, right? There's so many different angles that you can go on that. Like, why is water not piped everywhere? What's the process of piping water everywhere? What's the process of cleaning water? What is the difference between pure water and what is back? Like, there's just so many different things that you can spin off by having a driving question. And I think that a lot of the times we're so focused on the answers that we forget that there's these really compelling questions that we can ask, and then say, okay, so what do you want to know about this? What don't you know about this already? And I think that like, having these true essential questions that drive this virtual learning, my fear would be we all go back to school someday, and then we go back to the textbooks because everyone has one. We put on the movie so everyone can watch it because they have the projector. And it's like, right now we know some kids don't have access to those devices. They don't have strong internet. They don't have family and parent support. And so we have to provide different options so that every kid can actually move forward. And let's not lose that.
100%. How can we take what we're learning now and figure out how we are designing these meaningful opportunities, given the barriers we know? How do we take that and bring that back into our schools when we do finally go back and we all are in the same room? So we talked a little bit about UDL, and I'm so glad you brought up deeper learning. My kids, big fan. My kids go to a school that's very focused on deeper learning and authentic projects. And it's just been really amazing to see them flourish in that kind of environment. But people don't often see how UDL, deeper learning, learner-centered, they might see these things as like, oh, these are 3 different things. Like, one person personalizes, then you do UDL, and then you do deeper learning. Yeah. And so I think we've seen like, no, these are all one of the same in service of our goals to get kids to have really powerful learning opportunities and the outcomes we want for kids. So I'd love if you take just a minute and just explain what is UDL? Why do we even need to be thinking about that now in our classrooms, and specifically as we're designing for kids remotely?
Yeah, sure. So the UDL is, always will be a framework to eliminate the inequities of one size fits all teaching and learning. So the way that I was taught to teach was completely one size fits all, which is like, now you're all going to read this. Now you're all going to watch this video. Now you're all going to take this test, and everyone gets the same thing. And the only way to be free of that is to have a legal document of an IEP or a 504 that gives you permission to do something else. And it's so reactive, and there's just so much like stereotype, and you have to lower your expectations a lot of the time to do that. And the reality is we should not be teaching in a one size fits all way, because we can actually predict the variability in a room. So whoever's watching this right now, I'm going to pretend that you teach third grade, and your third grade class is actually inclusive, which means that any kid, when they come to school, has an equal chance of getting into any of the classes. Like, there's not like a class for special education. There's not a class for English learners, but it's truly inclusive education, which is federally endorsed, and we're all trying to move towards, right? So in this inclusive classroom, I will tell you right now, you're going to have kids below grade level. You're going to have kids with a very high understanding that are above grade level with their academic understanding. You will have kids who experience trauma. You will have kids who are English learners, who have disabilities, some mild, some more profound. You're going to have kids that have social emotional struggles or behavioral challenges. We know that already. And so why, since we know that, are we going to deliver something that is so one size fits all? So the analogy that I use all the time is like at a dinner party. If I were to have a dinner party at my house and you were to tell me, no matter what, you have to make sure that everyone who comes to your house has a meal they enjoy and that they can eat, like dietarily eat. There's no way I'm making you a tuna noodle casserole. Like, that would be asinine to serve the same thing to everyone, because I can predict if 30 strangers are coming to my house, there's going to be somebody who has like a lactose intolerance or a gluten sensitivity, or they might have an allergy. The more common allergy is to eggs and wheat and dairy. There's going to be some picky eaters. There's going to be people with really big appetites, really small appetites. And so plating something and putting it in front of someone when they have no choice doesn't work. Because people are going to say, I can't eat that, or like, that's gross, I'm not eating it. And the same thing happens in classrooms. Like, when we go into this third grade inclusive classroom and we say, you're going to read Charlotte's Web and you're going to answer this question in an essay form, and then you're going to do these math problems and finish this lab, you have some kids who can't access that. They can't self-regulate. They don't have the persistence. And you have some kids who are going to be bored because they can do it already. And so the answer is not to personalize something for every person. I am not a short order cook. So if I throw a party at my house, I am not making 30 meals. I refuse to do it. And in class, I'm not making 30 lessons or 200 lessons. Instead, I'm going to put out a buffet. And to do that, I have to have firm goals and flexible means. So the firm goals is like, what really is the thing that I want everybody to do? At my party, I want everyone to be able to have a well-balanced meal with multiple food groups that leaves them feeling like satiated, like they're not hungry when they leave, and have some sort of enjoyment from the food. And in my classroom, let's go back to Charlotte's Web, it might be that I want students to understand characterization, to when they respond to a narrative, that they're focused on using dialogue, and that they understand how to count by sixes using base 10, right? If those are the goals, there are so many ways that kids could get to those goals without reading Charlotte's Web, answering the essay, and doing a worksheet. And so I have to step back and I have to say, what are all the ways? Well, they could watch this Brain Pop video, they could read this section of the text, they could work with me in a small group, they could choose whatever book they want to read. That book could be audio, it could be epic, right? And I start to put out this buffet, and then, as you said with your own kids, you have to take the time to reflect on the options and create goals and to create strategies. So going back to my dinner party, I'd be like, okay, everyone, just so you know, like, we're all going to be focused on using multiple food groups tonight. And so here's a visual with the different food groups you need. I've put the things in different bowls, like all the veggies are in blue bowls and all the things are in, green bowls. And here's a recipe if you want to make a lasagna. Here's a recipe if you want to make this, but like, play with it. Do the best you can. Even if you put in one pea for the vegetable, try something new, take a no thank you bite, right? And if you think about who could eat a tuna noodle casserole out of 30, you're missing people. Who can eat out of a buffet? Almost everybody. And then for the people with such really profound, specific needs, I can make a meal for them. That's one or two people. And that's where you think about, right now, we're trying to intervention our way out of really inequitable, really inaccessible first learning opportunities.
Oh my God. Can I just say that like much louder? Where the inequitable opportunities that we are trying to create, that we're trying to get ourselves out of, like you said, by different intervention programs is not the way to do it. I see people all the time. It's like, we're going to do RTI. We're going to have very low level basic instruction. And then, thank you. And then we're going to have our RTI time. So we can't do anything else. We can't have an interdisciplinary block of learning because we have to have our team for intervention, our time for intervention. Right. And that does not meet the needs of anybody often. And people often get frustrated by the learning. They feel disconnected. And I think the other thing you said is the buffet provides people choice, and they're driving their learning. That's the agency. They're making choices. They're aware of it. Because if you're behind the scenes making all the food, they have no idea what they're doing. They're not,
and they can't feed themselves.
Right? Then you're not there. Right. If you're not there, they can't feed themselves. They're like, where's Katie? Where's mom? I don't know how to do this when she's not around. Instead of saying, here are your resources. Here are the tools. Here are some guides. I've designed this for you, but you have to actually do the work. Mm-hmm. And so often we hear that kids are, they're just like not engaged, and I can't get to care, and because we do so much for people. And I often talk about like over scaffolding, right? That's like you set up the process for people and then you drag them through it, rather than saying, here are the resources. Now, what are you going to do with it? And how are you going to make something? And once people get over it and realize that they have to do it for themselves, they actually truly enjoy the process and get way more out of it.
Right. I mean, again, it's a huge shift. And so, like, to answer your question, UDL is a framework by which we eliminate barriers to learning by predicting variability and designing for variability, and then allowing kids to self-differentiate. And that's that real learner-centered connection. Is I honor and I share my power with students to say, you have to get here. These are a bunch of ways that I feel like you can get there. If you need an additional pathway, I'm open to your feedback. But like, authentically, it's important to know this thing, and here's why. Here's all the ways that you can get there. And again, I think that is, in some ways, you have to grieve the loss of your power, because there is no sitting around the rug reading your favorite story anymore to students. There's no like, this is my favorite lab. You're really saying, like, to honor you as a learner, I have to share the design power with you. And, certainly I'm going to be always using multiple pieces of evidence to be responsive and to provide feedback and to support students in making better decisions the next time through this process of like, okay, choose, do, now I'm going to review with you. Did it allow you to get closer to your goal? If not, how do we have to do this differently? And people always say, yeah, but some kids with really significant disabilities can't make choices. And I call baloney like you've never seen, because I have 4 kids and I have raised 4 6-month-olds. So some people will say to me, I know, but cognitively he's like a 6-month-old. If you have a 6-month-old and you put like a banana and a cookie in front of them, they can absolutely make a choice. So like, we need to get out of that, like they can't make a choice. And then the next thing is, well, they can't make a good choice. You know how you know to make good choices is you make bad ones. And so like, again, one of the analogies that I use all the time is like, my husband is like amazing, love of my life. I dated a lot of people before him. And I made those choices. And after those relationships were over, I was like, oh, that wasn't a good choice because of this. And so the next time I make a choice, I want to do more of this and less of this, right? And over time, you make better decisions. And so I am not really upset when my kids make poor decisions. I'm going to take the time to reflect and review and say, okay, I know that you thought that was a great way for your learning. Let's reflect on why it wasn't and how you choose differently next time. And all we can do is move forward.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. A lot of times we talk about failure, right? Like, everyone has to fail. Failing's not the goal, right? No one's trying to fail and no one's trying to make a bad choice. But if you don't try them and have opportunities to learn from them, then you don't know how to improve. And I think that's the piece, is how do you make those choices? How do you fail? How do you make mistakes so that you can get better and figure out how to continue to improve?
Absolutely.
I could talk to you seriously all day long, Katie, but one of the things that you said that made me think of, as we're designing to remove barriers, either in the classroom or at home, what has really stood out to me recently is everyone sharing all these resources and content, is that teachers now are realizing I don't have all the answers, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if I'm not in front of you, you can't rely solely on me or our textbook to have all the answers. And I think you mentioned that, like, we can't be the experts all the time in the room, especially when you're designing and providing these options, providing different access points to get the information. So a text, you said an audiobook, it could be a friend, it could be you as the teacher, but that takes the pressure off of the educator to be the only one who has the information. So I just want to like throw that back to you and share, what are some other ways that teachers can really grieve that loss of power, as you said, and get over themselves to really provide opportunities for kids to learn beyond what the teacher knows or can do?
Well, I think that this epic pandemic shutdown is providing us in some way, if we can make lemonade out of lemons, is that I think that all of us are now faced with the reality that kids don't know how to learn independently. We're providing these options for them. And I know, in speaking not only to my own colleagues, but colleagues across the country, of like, kids aren't doing the work. And I think in a lot of ways, they have become so dependent on someone to force them to do the work, but we're creating, or we're preparing them for a future that's going to be exactly like this. You know, companies are moving virtual because brick and mortar is an investment that's not necessary anymore in a lot of ways. And we need a workforce, and teachers have risen to that immediately, to be completely independently, autonomously reaching out to their kids using the best ways they know how, right? But we need our kids to do that as well. It's like, we have to build purposeful, motivated, resourceful. And so I think that, you know, even if your kids are doing really well in the content with you, we can offer them the opportunity to not only learn the content, but more importantly, to learn how to be learners, to learn how to self-regulate, how to solve problems, how to be resourceful, how to understand their own passions. And again, that will be tricky at first, but there are so many people right now saying, I can't get my kids to do anything. My kids aren't even logging on. And in some ways, you know, some of them may not be able to access the instruction because they don't have internet or a device, but other people, it's just, there's a simple lack of engagement. Is like, I don't care. I don't have the skills or the resources to troubleshoot this, or I just can't cope and regulate with everything that's going on. And so, you know, I think that what we have to do as educators is not only be thinking about how we share these academic resources, which right now everything in the world is free. Like, you can get Newsela, you can get IXL, you can get iWrite, everything is free. That's easier than saying, how do we create opportunities for our kids to become learners? And I think that's what we need to collaborate about a little bit more, because, you know, I want to move away from thinking about myself as a teacher and thinking about myself instead as, I'm an instructional designer and facilitator. I design instruction, I facilitate learning. But it's not on me to just put out information that kids can consume. And we've almost created an entire generation of kids who are so used to that, that when you have to say, like, listen, you just got to get up on your own and do some of this work, it's like, like, what?
Yeah, I just shared a blog that I wrote a couple years ago and I was like, this is more relevant than ever, the evolving role of the educator to be that co-designer of learning experiences, that connector and activator, and someone that really builds that learning community. Though that's a way different role than, I have the information, I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to check off that you did it and manage your day-to-day. And I think your point is just really, really important, that right now, instead of just figuring out how to get kids content, even when it's not free, it's accessible, right? Yeah. We have more and more content available out there. So getting content to kids should not be the number one issue. It's how do we help them learn to learn? I love that you said that. And I love that you hit on that. So I'm going to stop us there, because I think that's an important piece for people to connect with. And I just, Katie, let us know, how can people reach out to you? How can people find your resources, your many books? Let us know where to get all of that awesome information.
Yep, you can find me on anytime I'm on social media. I'm Katie Novak UDL, which again, you're welcome to reach out for me. My website is novakeducation.com. It's just NOVAK. And there's a ton of free resources on there, blog postings, the homeschool plans. Again, it's novakeducation.com, and you can find out in some of my collaborations. I recently worked. Katie wrote a foreword for a book that I wrote with George Koros called Innovate Inside the Box, and it was awesome working with her on that. And that's how we became the Katies. And just know that I'm always available. We're in this together. And I think that the magic is going back and resetting and saying, again, the content is important, but a really learned person can go get that content. Right now, I could learn almost anything I wanted to. Not that I have all the information, but I know where to find it, and I know where to find the people who are most reputable to help me make sense of it. And that's what we are for kids, is we need them to go find it and then to learn it at such a level that they need us to make sense of it. And when they're coming towards us, instead of us always like coming towards them, it creates a really beautiful synergy in the classroom that is learner-centered, that is much deeper in terms of how much kids have to think about those answers. And then, of course, because we're meeting the needs of multiple kids and the questions they ask, that's universally designed.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much, Katie, for being here. Thank you for being
Hi, nice to chat with you.
And make sure you connect with Katie, and make sure you share your thoughts on and next steps from what you thought on this conversation. Thanks, Katie.
Later, Kate. Bye.